Hi, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Kate. I'm so glad to be back with you tonight and to introduce you to a wonderful new friend. Say hello, everyone, to Kiko, Suura.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. I'm so glad that you're with us. I've met Kiko through our friends at St. John's Cathedral, and we're so happy to have you here tonight.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, happy to be here.
Good, good. And one of the reasons that we're so glad to have you here as we've reached the end of Pride Month is getting to know you a little bit as a chance for us to get to know more about the trans community. Not that you speak for everybody, you speak for yourself, for Kiko, and yet at the same time, I feel like your experience is going to be really enriching for us. So thank you for being willing to come and share it with us.
Oh yeah, of course.
Great. So, first of all, I'm wondering if you could share with us your pronouns.
Yes. Yeah, my pronouns are he, him, his.
He, him, his, and also for the folks at home, why is it important to share pronouns? This is something that I think that we're all learning right now.
Yeah, it's important, especially nowadays, because I think we tend to assume someone's pronouns based on how they might look or present themselves when that's not always the case. And it's basically kind of like getting someone's name right. It's just kind of a form of respect to get their pronouns right as well.
Got it. Okay, a form of respect, and and just as we're sort of getting into the conversation, a little work around defining terms. What does the term trans mean, and also what's the difference between trans and non-binary?
So, trans is basically someone whose gender identity doesn't really align with what they were assigned at birth. And so in my case, I was born female, but I am a man, so I'm a trans man. Whereas in terms of non-binary people, they don't really align to either male or female. They're just non-binary.
Can you say maybe one or two more sentences about what you know about non-binary? Like, how does a
Sure.
person, yeah.
Sure. So they don't really usually their pronouns tend to be they them, and they don't really identify as being a man or as being a woman. They, you know, don't really. They kind of hmm, what's the best way to put this? They don't. Yeah, I guess the best way to put it is they don't really identify as either or. They are just themselves. I
Oh, that's good.
hopefully
That's
give
very
them
poetic, which
justice.
is so close. That's great. Thank you for that. And and I'm wondering, would you feel comfortable telling us a little bit about your journey of
Sure.
transition, transformation?
Sure. So, my story basically started when I was 4, and I actually knew that I was not really a girl. Like, I always identified as a boy, wanted to hang out with the boys, did all the boy things. Um, and, once I got to college, I learned what, you know, being trans was, and that's when it hit me. It's like, oh, that's me. But my story is a little bit. So I kind of socially transitioned first before I physically transitioned. What that means is basically, I'm originally from Texas, and I went to college in California. So when I came out to California, nobody knew who I was. And then also, I had the privilege of being what we call passing. And what that means is that, I even before I physically transitioned, I could pass as a man. I would say
Mhm.
around, depending on where, 50 to 80% of the time. Um, so everybody from college onward just knew me as a guy, knew me by Kiko, and I didn't physically really transition until maybe 3 years ago. But because the changes for me were very subtle, um, a lot of people didn't really notice. Um, so this year was actually when I came out. I had come out to like very few close friends, like maybe a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
Um, uh-oh, frozen, huh? Am
Yes.
I back?
For, uh,
Okay,
you.
sorry.
That's okay. I can hear you anyway.
Oh, good. Um,
I think you're
so
back.
I guess,
Backing up, backing
am
up
I
for
back?
just a
Okay.
minute, you said something really beautiful about how um, even before you transitioned, you had the privilege of passing. And
Yes.
I just
Yeah.
love your use of the word privilege there, that it
Thanks.
sounds like you had this opportunity to live how you felt comfortable
Mhm.
living. And you use the word
Yeah,
privilege,
and
you use the word luxury.
yeah, because it's definitely something that is not, a lot of trans people don't have that privilege. So they do have to physically transition before they can socially transition. Whereas in my case, that wasn't the case at all. Um, so I actually didn't start coming out to people till around 3 years ago, and
Mhm.
that was only to like maybe 5 people. And then I actually came out completely and publicly this year. So I came out on March 31st as Trans Day of Visibility, and I work at a digital media company with a little bit of a following, and I thought it might be cool for them because they want to amplify diverse voices within their company as well. So I came out on social media on March 31st to everybody. But before that, like January through March was just rapid fire coming out to all of my close friends. Um, and just telling them, even though the response I got for the most part was, oh no, we kind of figured it out, we just didn't want to ask because we figured you'd tell us when you're ready, which was a very respectful answer. And
What
yeah.
about your parents?
Oh yes, my parents. So I came out to my parents also around 2 or 3 years ago. And I've always been like this. So the one thing though was when I started taking hormones, my voice did drop a little bit to the point where they would definitely notice. So at that point, I was just like, I should let them know. And I told them before I was supposed to go home for Christmas, and I had emailed them. Um, so and basically put a bunch of resources that they could look up if they wanted to. Um,
Mhm.
and I didn't hear back. So I thought, oh, maybe they don't want me to come home. But then they reached out and they were like, oh, when are you coming home? And it's like, oh, what? And they're like, we didn't respond because we didn't know how to respond, but we'd like you to come home. And it's like, oh, okay. And they were both very accepting, which I'm very grateful for. And my relationship with my dad was actually the best it had been since I was probably a kid after that. Because I think everything just all of a sudden made sense to him.
Mhm.
Um, and then with my mom, she was very quick about, using the correct pronouns and, um, calling me her son. So I, again, very, very lucky.
Wow.
Um, yeah. And then
I'm
my
imagining that
brother's,
must have felt so good. It must have felt so
oh,
good.
yes. Yeah, definitely. Because I had no idea how they were going to react. Because they had said some things that were slightly homophobic and transphobic in the past. But I think once they educated themselves on it, they were just 100% very supportive. So
Wow. Wow, they sound like awesome people.
yeah, I'm very lucky to have them as my parents for sure.
Yeah, you were about to mention your brother, I think.
Oh yes, and my brother with him, he's 7 years younger than me. He's like 20. He's in his 20s, so
Mhm.
he was just like, okay, yeah, sure, makes sense. It was very casual. Like it's like, okay, great, that was easy.
Oh my gosh. Well, isn't that funny? Even in 7 years, the culture's moving, right? The culture's moved a
Hmm.
little bit.
Definitely, yeah.
So, um, I'm wondering, as a trans person, are there questions that you get asked that feel disrespectful to you or inconsiderate somehow that maybe people are curious and they want to learn, but they also kind of put their foot in it somehow.
Yeah, definitely. So a question that I've heard people get is one big no-no is basically asking where they are in their physical transition. So in terms of what surgeries they've gotten,
Mhm.
what body parts they have, that's a
Mhm.
big no-no. And another one is basically a lot of us have something called a dead name, and that's basically a name that we were assigned to at birth that we may not associate with anymore. Um, and it a lot of people really don't like it when you ask what their dead name is or what was your name before your transition, because it could bring up a lot of you know pain from their past. It could be quite triggering. So we generally want to avoid anything like that, or really anything that might be pre-transition if you don't know them. Everybody's a little bit different, so people are gonna be okay with different things.
Right.
But if you don't really know them very well, it's better to just err on the side of caution and assume
Yeah.
that
I'm also wondering if
Mhm.
being asked your dead name can feel like people are saying to you, what's your quote unquote real name when you know that your real
Yeah,
name is your current name, your
right,
name.
right.
Your name is
Yeah.
your name, not that dead name.
Definitely. Yeah, and a lot of people, yeah, that's actually a solid point. Yeah, does feel like someone's asking you, "Hey, what's your real name though?" I get that this is like your name now is like your nickname, but what's your real name? Yeah, it does kind of feel like that for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I was curious about uh, people that you know in the trans community, what their transition experience is like. Is do you feel like your experience is typical, being 4 years old and knowing, or
It's
do you feel like if it's more often at a later age?
it varies quite a bit. I think some people definitely do know at 4, from what I've seen. The people that I know personally, they actually didn't figure it out till quite a bit later.
Mm,
Um, so whether that was, in college or in their adult life.
mm,
Um, and, their journeys were a little bit different too, because one of them, I know another trans man, and um, he identified as a lesbian originally. And
mhm,
then he figured out, I think, oh, for him, it was after college, actually. He figured out it wasn't that
mhm,
he actually did identify as a man. And then I know another person who identifies as non-binary, and they didn't figure that out till college. Um, and then yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting. When when I was in college, no one talked about any of this, and so it's so beautiful to me that um, that people are able to live their truth now,
yeah.
more so than before. I'm sure you would probably say it could be a lot better, you know.
Well, I think yeah, we've definitely come a long way because people are coming out at a more than ever, I think, just based on the platforms that are available, like social media, um, but also because people are more accepting. And because even when I was in college, about 10 years ago, it was still like people kind of threw the term around, but
Mm,
it was still sometimes used kind of in a degrading manner, a little bit.
mm.
And there were definitely moments where it's like I don't feel safe to do this, and I'm sure there are still parts of the country where people don't feel safe to do so.
I'm sure
Um,
that's true. But but uh, but this is an ancient experience, right? I mean, not
yeah,
new.
so right, yeah, it's been around for a while. I do know that in indigenous cultures they have something called two spirit, which is
And what's
akin
that?
to I believe it's akin to the trans experience,
Okay.
where you have two spirits, one of, either gender.
Mhm,
I'm still learning quite a bit about this as well,
mhm,
because, you know, even though I am trans, I actually tried not to learn too much about it because there was a bit of, even though I've known since I was 4, there was a definitely self-rejection and a little bit
mhm,
of, you know, I was basically rejecting myself on the inside and, basically opting not to do my research until pretty recently. Um, but I think that's why visibility like this, what we are having now, is so important, is so
mhm.
people can feel okay with accepting them for who they are and, not being afraid to look into it, the trans experience and stuff like that, if that's what they identify with, and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I, I, I'm struck by what you said. So little 4-year-old you, or 8-year-old
mhm.
you, or 15-year-old you. It sounds like it was you're saying that you weren't entirely um, well, again, I mean, you were talking about not looking into the history because there was some kind of negative self-talk or something. What did you just say?
Yeah, basically just self-rejection, essentially.
Self-rejection.
Just
So didn't
yeah.
why would there be self-rejection?
Well, I think when, you're something that's not considered normal at the time. Because there was a whole like tomboy thing, but I knew that
Mhm.
wasn't it. Like,
Yeah.
because that was still a girl who was just kind of boyish, and I knew that's not what I was. But at the same time, you know, it's like, well, you're different, and especially as a kid and a teenager, all you want to do is fit in.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
also, I come from a Japanese household,
Mhm.
so for part of that culture is not wanting to disappoint your parents. So that was another factor.
Yeah.
Um, and basically, that kind of leads to a lot of self-hate,
Mm.
which, you kind of have to, like, I was able to work through college, and then, as an adult, it's like totally fine now. But
Mhm.
I think that's why there is unfortunately a fairly high suicide rate in the LGBTQ plus community, but a very big uh, percentage in the trans youth community as well.
That's
So
extremely heartbreaking,
mhm,
isn't it?
yeah,
That people would just feel like there wasn't a space for them to be who they are
yeah,
and to
and
not feel safe to be who they are.
mhm. And so it is quite embarrassing for me sometimes because I feel like I'm a little ignorant of certain things in the
Uh-huh.
trans community. I'm
Mhm.
still learning too, but I think that's what this whole process is for everybody, is just kind of learning and um, you know learning that uh, about all these different communities and everybody's journey.
Yeah, and it sounds like that's maybe what was so exciting for you about March of last year, right? That wasn't that when
Oh,
you said that sort of coming out moment.
oh, March of this year, actually.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
this year. Oh my gosh,
it
it
was
was
this
just
year.
oh wow.
Very
Okay.
recent.
Very recent, I know. Okay. Yeah, so that sort of official, something official about that maybe.
Yeah, and it honestly felt like a huge weight lifted off
Did
of my
it?
shoulders. Oh yeah, definitely, because I was definitely, it felt like I was keeping this huge part of me inside towards
Mhm.
90% of the people that I knew for so long. Um, and there's definitely a fear behind it too, even though, you know, I live in LA. I, work in a pretty progressive industry that is accepting of a lot of people, like of different walks of life. But yeah, I'm not sure. I guess just growing up in a time where this wasn't completely accepted, there's always a fear of, oh well, what if I lose friends, or what if my parents disown me, or what if I lose my job, um, or what if I get like all these hate comments on social media, which is a thing too. But I think that's why I waited for so long to
Mhm.
come out, was because it took a little bit longer for me to be secure with who I was, because
Mhm.
I had the external support, but I didn't have the internal support. And now that I do, um, that's why I think this year, just I don't know, I decided to come out, and it was, I don't regret it in the bit. I don't regret
Did the
coming out, and I
pandemic
don't also
have
regret the
anything to do
timing.
with it? Did the experience of the
Yeah,
pandemic year have something to do with it?
definitely. So my 2020 was a little bit interesting. So before the pandemic, my mom actually had a stroke in January, and she
Mhm.
survived, fortunately. But then in February, my dad got diagnosed with terminal cancer, and in March, he passed away from cancer. And then
Oh.
the quarantine happened, lockdown happened, and so it really kind of, like, all those things lined up, kind of really forced me to reanalyze my life, and especially because I had an idea in my head, because I had been out to my parents at that point. I had an idea in my head what kind of man I wanted to be, to show them, and I wasn't there in time. Um, so it made me think, well, what can I do now, given this situation? And I think with quarantine, a lot of people, everybody had a lot of time for self-reflection, and realizing you know the mortality that we're faced with every single day, and that we can't really control when we go. Um, so for me, it was just like, well, I want to be living the most authentic life
Mm.
as possible. And yeah, and my work, oh, and also with the Black Lives Matter movement, and a lot of things just kind of opening my eyes to a lot of the world that I was kind of blind to, I think. Um, yeah, just woke me up to like, okay, this is what I need to do, and I think I'm ready now.
Yeah,
And I
it was
think,
a year of truths, wasn't it? Uh,
mhm,
um,
yeah,
you know how when I hear you tell the story of of this past year, the way that the way that I hear it is that you what you did by coming out, it's a tribute to your dad in a way, because
mhm, yeah,
wouldn't he be so proud for you? Doesn't every parent at their best want their children to be fully who they are,
mhm.
and so I don't know, I just think that's beautiful.
Oh, thank
And
you.
not only that, but you became a Christian this year, an official baptized Christian, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
Tell
lots of
us about
changes.
that. How in the did that come up during the pandemic too, in a
It
way?
did, yeah. I don't exactly know what how I found St. John's Online again. I
Mhm,
think, because I had gone there 5 years ago, 'cause
mhm,
I had a friend who worked there, and she was like, "Oh, you should come, check it out." Um, and I remember whenever I did go, I there was something that grounded me, and it felt like I was home, kinda.
mhm,
And, you know because I started tuning in when lockdown happened digitally, and, listening to, the sermons and watching the services online, I just was like, I yeah, it just made me wanna officially be baptized because I there was a calling for me to, and there had been other things that had happened in the past where I felt that there was
mhm,
someone, looking out for me or guiding me, and I couldn't really explain why. Um,
mhm,
but I just, contacted Father Mark after about 6 months, I think, of watching digitally, and was like, I think I'd like to be baptized at St. John's, and then just joined the formation class in um, June. So last like yeah, it's been a month now. Yeah,
mhm.
got baptized there.
Wow. What about most people are baptized as babies. I was baptized at the
Mhm.
age of 23 in Korea,
Oh,
actually. I was living
oh
there.
wow,
So I remember it
awesome.
vividly. And I always think it's so lucky when we get to be baptized as adults because we
Hmm.
can be fully cognizant of the experience.
Yeah,
What was it like? What did it feel like being baptized as an adult?
it it I mean, it was a big decision. I took it as a very serious decision, which is what Father Mark encouraged from the get-go, in the formation class. But once I committed to it, I think there was something that was in my heart that was just kind of telling me that that was like the right move. Uh,
Mm.
Very similar to actually when I came out, like something deep inside was telling me, yeah, this
Mhm.
is the right move. Um, and
That's the Holy Spirit.
yeah,
In
and
Christian language, right?
right, right.
So
And,
beautiful.
while the process was happening, it was just like, you know, just happiness, joy. And then afterwards, it was just like I just felt very serene and very, like, yeah, just very happy.
Isn't it the best, those feelings, those times in life when you feel so strongly that you're being led and guided
Mhm.
into new life of one kind or
Yeah.
another are just the best experiences. I mean, it's almost like you take your hands off the wheel,
Mhm.
and and you're and you find yourself in these moments that you almost couldn't have even imagined. I mean, that's how I experience it, and yeah, um,
Mhm.
I'm really happy for you, and I'm really happy
Well, thank you.
for the church, and it may. I'm not sure if this is true or not, but you may be here in this diocese the first, maybe, or one of the first people who. Um, baptized not by their, as you use the expression, dead name, but as
Hmm.
your true name now. Is that right? Do you think that's possible?
I think it might be. Yeah, I'm actually not sure, but that I mean,
Mhm.
I believe it, and if
That's great. That's a
that's
great
that's
claim to
incredible.
fame, right?
Yeah. So yeah,
Maybe
it's a
you'll
great
get
honor
maybe
for
you'll get
sure.
a plaque at St. John's.
Ooh, that'd be cool.
Isn't that
Yeah,
the most
definitely a
beautiful
good
church?
honor.
I love that church. It's
I'm sorry?
so beautiful, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's a very gorgeous church. Hmm.
I love it. Um, I can't remember if I asked you this at the beginning of the
Yeah.
conversation, but did we talk about the difference between gender identity and sexual orientation?
Oh, no, we didn't.
That's another
Yeah,
definition I wanted to get to tonight
yeah,
because I think that's something else that people probably could use help understanding.
for sure. So gender identity is basically how you identify as, male, female, non-binary, um, stuff like that. Sexual orientation is the gender that you're attracted to. So, or genders in some cases. So it
Mhm,
could be like straight, gay, bi, pan. Um, that's sexual orientation. So usually people have both. They have a gender identity. So let's say I'm a trans man,
mhm,
and then they can have a sexual orientation,
mhm,
which in my case, I'm pan. So I basically,
mhm,
regardless of the other person's gender identity, that doesn't really matter to me. And in other cases, let's say, you can be a cis male. So cis male means you were born a man at birth and you identify as being a man, and then you can also be pan as well. So it's
mhm.
everybody, yeah, has both a gender identity and orientation, or they
So
could be asexual.
gender identity is how you identify as opposed to your
Mhm.
assignment at birth, right?
Identity is how you basically just how you identify. Yeah, it could be in relation to how you identify in relation to birth. So yeah, cis male versus trans male would be they were born male and identify as male versus trans man, which is born female or assigned female at birth, but are identify as a man. Hmm.
So it's assigned versus identified, right?
For I'm sorry for which one?
Sorry. No, I think I understand it. Um, the gender to which you're assigned at birth is one thing, and it might be that that is correct for you in your life, and it may be that it's not correct for you in your life, right? And
Right,
then
right,
your identity
exactly.
is what's correct for you. Is that right? Like, what's your
Right,
truth?
exactly.
Your true
Yes, what's your
identity. Like,
what
like
is your true identity?
like you're
Mhm.
a trans man, so that's your true identity.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
got
Mhm.
it. Okay. Believe me, I'm not the only one who needs to learn this, so it's really, really helpful. Um, okay, so I have another question, um, and that is for for families with young
Yeah,
children. You know, so this would be a family's more like how it was for you at a very young age, right? Except imagine that it's a family these days and their child comes to them and says that well, I'm not exactly sure what the child would be able how the child would be articulating it, but maybe they would say, um, I don't feel like I'm a girl, or I don't feel like
yeah.
I'm a boy.
Mhm.
Um, um, what would you say to parents in a situation like that? What kind of advice would you give to them?
I think well, first and foremost, I think that the fact that their kid came up to them to begin with is very beautiful because that means they trust their parent a lot, and feels like the kid feels like, they could go up to the parent for anything and open up to them about anything, which I think is a very strong, parent-child connection. Um,
Mm,
and I think, you know, I would recommend not, you know. I just recommend listening to the child because, like I said, from my experience, I knew when I was 4, and I think it helps having a parent being there to listen and to support them and to guide them through it as the kid is figuring it out, and figuring out what the best process is for that child. Because every child's going to be a little bit different, and thankfully there's thanks to the internet, there's a lot of great resources online for
Mhm.
parents of trans youth as well, where they could research all about gender identity, um, you know processes like transition processes, um, and stuff like that. Um,
Mhm.
so I think, yeah, the key thing is just, I think, to listen and to support. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe implied in what you're saying too is just to relax
mhm.
and keep the conversation going and keep the listening.
Yeah, because I think the most dangerous thing is for the child to feel, suppressed and not be able to trust their parent anymore.
Yeah.
And, that, and feeling isolated and feeling like they can't go anywhere. Um, and so I think, yeah, just to listen and support.
Yeah, that would be so hard. That would be very, very hard. So, so you were mentioning that there are resources that the parents could draw on.
Yeah.
Are there some resources that you can recommend for us um, that we can use to educate ourselves? And I'm not able to see the chat tonight, whereas I usually am. But I'm thinking that maybe Justin, you could put these in the chat if you have any suggestions for us, Kiko, for
Oh, sure.
resources or places to learn more.
Yeah, I really like, the Trans Wellness Center is a really good one, and the LA LGBT Center also has a lot of good resources as well.
Great. And they probably have websites that we can visit and
Yes.
learn more.
Yeah.
Okay, the Trans
All
Wellness
online.
Center and the
Mhm.
LA LGBT Center.
Yes.
Okay, great. And here's another question. This is kind of I don't know, this is a little bit of a philosophical question, but I'm wondering, would you say that is trans, is it a destination or is it an ever evolving kind of a process? And then I guess I'd
So,
have to ask, is anybody's identity a
mhm,
destination or an ever evolving process? But I'm asking it for you as a trans man.
yeah, I think it is an ever evolving process.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, especially after coming out, I realized that there were a lot of, while I was suppressing the fact that I was trans, I was also suppressing other facets of my personality. And so I'm realizing those aspects of me now. And also, even talking just about gender, like um, like how I present myself, and it's just learning. It's a ever changing, ever learning, and I'm sure it's not just stationary either. I'm sure there is some fluidity in it as well, especially to some people, because there are definitely gender fluid people as well who identify as you know a certain gender identity or maybe non-binary, but they like to express themselves to what is considered, I guess, in a societal sense, masculine or feminine, um, androgynous. Um, so I think there's so many little different aspects of it that it's just an ever evolving, ever learning process, for everybody, especially because I do think there are societal norms, that you know that affect how you think you should present yourself, and I know I that was me as well. So, I knew I was a trans man, but I thought I had to be this macho, masculine, you know, dude, when in reality, it's
You don't
like
have to be a dude.
yeah, it's like it's okay to like fashion and stuff like that, and it's things that are considered, I guess, more on the feminine side, and then it leads to the question, what is masculine and feminine, anyways? It's just kind of
Oh, yeah.
so it leads to this kind of rabbit hole of deeper questions, and I think at the end of the day, it's just figuring out what makes each individual happy, what makes me happy, and just moving in that direction.
Yeah. One of the early church fathers, Irenaeus, said that the glory of God is humankind fully alive. And I think we
Mhm,
glorify God when we're our most authentic selves. And that's
mhm,
a journey, right? That's a journey for for every person with their gender
mhm,
identity and so many other aspects of identity. Like you said, it's all connected, right? And
mhm.
that your trans journey was unlocking other parts of yourself too, right?
Yeah.
Fuller expression of a fuller expression of you. And also culture moves. As culture
Mhm,
moves, not as quickly as we would ever want, but as it moves, then more things become possible and imaginable in our lives. Um, I mean, for instance, women, gosh, when I was a kid, the roles for women and the things women could do were restricted, and now,
mhm,
all these years later, much less so. Um, but for my daughter, even much less so. So it's yeah. So even in my experience, it's also true that it's evolving along with the culture. Or
mhm.
maybe the culture is evolving along with us. I mean, I don't know exactly how it works. um, um, so, what are some ways, if we have a trans person in our lives, what are some ways that we can and be supportive um, to them? This is sort of similar to the parent-child question, I think, but more in the adult world.
Yeah, I think, just kind of treating them like any other person, I think is the biggest thing, and it's just because at the end of the day, a person's gender identity is just one part of their, being, and there are
Right.
so many other parts of themselves too. So, I think, yeah, just getting, like, for instance, with what's been awesome with my friends is that even after I came out, it's literally no different. Like, you would have never known that anything big has happened this March. Um, and I take that as a blessing because I wouldn't want it any other way. Because, at the end of the day, we just want to feel like we belong. And the best way to do that is just to, you know, act like they're just like any other person, I think.
Mm,
So,
mm. That sounds good. And I'm wondering, it's sort of um, as a way of wrapping up our conversation tonight, I'm wondering if there's anything else that you would like to say to us tonight, an idea or a thought or an insight that you'd like to leave us with.
oh, well, I'm very grateful to be on here because I think the biggest way to understand, you know, certain communities is just to listen to the stories of, and like you were saying at the beginning, my story does not, everybody's
Mhm.
story at all. But I think just, meeting somebody of a different background and of a different experience, um, leads to empathy towards that group, which would sometimes be otherized in a certain sense. And
Did you
I
say
think
otherwise?
otherized, yeah,
Otherized. Uh, to other, yeah,
otherized, yeah. And
yeah.
I think, yeah, the best thing is to get to know everybody. And I found that to be so true in my case, especially when I came out to my friends back home in Texas, where like I was the first trans person now that they knew of, and a lot of the things that they had believed beforehand are no, like they know that's not true. Like there's a lot of unhealthy um, misconceptions about trans people, like how some people think like we're like pedophiles or like perverts and stuff like that, which is why all the bathroom bills are a thing. When really, like honestly, in the bathroom, we just want to be invisible and just get out as fast as possible. um, like we do not want to be seen, especially because if we're not completely transitioned, it's difficult because it's like we might get beaten up in the men's room and we might get beaten up in the women's room. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things where you know when you get to know somebody truly from any experience, you realize that a lot of the misconceptions that people have are just not true. And I think that's the best way to learn to love all of
Mhm.
God's children, I think.
That's the best way. Well, thank you so much for giving us the chance to get to know you a little bit tonight. It's been a real
Yeah.
pleasure, and I think that you're my favorite new Christian.
No, thank you.
So, blessings to you, Kiko,
Thank you.
and thank you
Cheers.
all for being here tonight. I'm sorry I couldn't get to the chat. For some reason it was disabled, but I hope we got to all of your questions anyway. And I hope you all stay safe, and I'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone. Good night.
Bye.